Okay, good afternoon, everybody. My name's Claire Ebrey. I run a consultancy business, a freelance business called On the Level. I try to work to help businesses who want to make a difference in the world, a positive impact in the world. And I also set up Pride in Leadership with Matt Haworth. Matt, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everybody. My name's Matt Haworth. Background is I'm the founder of an organisation called Reason Digital, which is a team that works across the UK and across the world, in fact, helping pro-social organisations like charities, healthcare, government to use technology to make a difference. And as Claire said, we set up Pride in Leadership together because we noticed a shared challenge, I guess, in terms of LGBTQ plus representation and support within leadership.
Yeah, it's been going for a couple of years, but we've recently rebranded as Pride in Leadership, and it would be great if you would all have a wee look at our website, prideinleadership.co.uk. Join our mailing list, but we've also got some events coming up. So a live event on the 7th of July in Manchester, if you're around in Manchester or in the Northwest, and a couple of online events as well in July and September. And we're trying to get everything going at the moment and create a real sort of buzz and impact around this. Matt, do you want to explain some of the background to how we started it up?
Yeah, sure. So, we first started it up because I was at a awards dinner which Claire was organising, and Claire, you were talking about some of the great work that the organisation you were with was doing around kind of diversity, but there wasn't anything being said about LGBTQ plus, and I felt that was a bit of a gap that I experienced quite often. So I dropped you an email to say, I'm a gay man, I experienced this gap, and I think we should do something about it. And you were able to say, I'm gay too. We've known each other and worked together for years at that point, didn't know, hadn't had that conversation. That's when we realized, well, actually, if two people can kind of know each other in a network and work together, but not actually even not even have that kind of visibility with each other necessarily from a professional perspective, then surely, that problem must be more widespread. So we decided to go about solving that problem to begin with by creating a network of LGBTQ plus directors and leaders, which we got together. We had a dinner, and we actually managed to take over a zoo for an evening because one of our members was a chief operations officer there, and actually started to experience the value of just hearing other LGBTQ people sort of in leadership, their stories, some of the challenges that they'd faced, and how cathartic it was to kind of hear that it wasn't just you that had faced those feelings or seen that, and also just to get to know each other really, because as I'm sure we'll go into a little bit, that can be one of the challenges, is that kind of networking side of stuff.
Yeah, and we were already pretty old. I'm not saying you were as old as me, Matt, but we were pretty old by then, and we kind of figured that if we couldn't recognize in each other that we were gay, then the younger people sort of coming up and looking at their careers and thinking about where they might end up, they wouldn't have that sort of see me, be me experience, because how do you sort of observe this? How do we get people to break these barriers down? So Pride in Leadership looks at elevating, connecting and supporting LGBTQ plus leaders, and elevating is sort of raising the voice, amplifying the voice of leaders so that other people can see us out there. Connecting is bringing people together, and then supporting is being a bit of a peer network really, and helping each other if there are challenges or difficulties, and just recognizing that you're working with people who might have gone through similar experiences to you. So Matt, we should talk really about some of the challenges that are faced by the LGBT community in the workplace and in leadership roles. Would you be happy to do that?
Yeah, of course. I think a lot of people think that things are a lot better for LGBTQ plus people, and that there might not be issues. But actually, we know from speaking to our members, we've got over 500 of them now, that's not necessarily the case, particularly for everybody. And that's backed up by research from organisations like Stonewall. We know that up to around one in five people have experienced some form of issue or feel that they are unable to be their true self at work, and to be open about their sexuality or gender identity. You know, and I don't think society would kind of tolerate that in other protected characteristics, and so we don't think it should be tolerated when it comes to sexuality and gender identity. To an extent, sometimes with sexuality and gender identity, one has the ability to kind of to hide, to not disclose that in a way that might be difficult in other dimensions of diversity. And whilst that is a benefit sometimes in reducing the amount of kind of overt violence, harassment, bullying that we can experience, it can also have its challenges and negatives as well, and people can feel like they are forced into hiding about an aspect of their life. And for many straight people in particular, that can sound like, well, what's the big issue? You know, can't you just kind of get on with your work? How does it affect you working? But actually, I'd invite them to really think about, you know, all those conversations that you have at work, the friendships you form at work, the times that people ask you, what did you get up to this weekend? And imagine the extra kind of psychological strain of feeling like you are not in a safe environment where you can just openly talk about that, where you have to self-censor, where you have to kind of omit parts of your life. You won't be able to refer to your partner perhaps and what you've been up to. You might even, you know, not be able to bring your partner to kind of work events where other people are. And that can really take a toll over time. And, you know, research really backs that up. And that's before we begin to consider the impact of actually people, particularly in customer-facing roles, perhaps working in retail or on a shop floor, for whom, especially around gender identity, you know, abuse and harassment from customers can be a daily reality for some people. And actually, are the leaders of these organisations, the directors of these organisations, actually backing those people up? Do they have progressive policies in place? Do they have the right support in place? Are they working to eliminate that? You know, quite often not. And, you know, we think this professional network that we've set up is a good way to kind of help to raise visibility, help to raise awareness of that, and also to help hopefully share best practice amongst leaders and managers in these organizations. Because if you know, if we don't even feel safe sometimes to be out, then imagine what it's like for somebody more junior in our organization wondering about how this might affect their progression, for example, within the organization if they were to be out. So that's why we're doing what we're doing.
Yeah. And just to add to that as well, I think one of the other challenges is there is very little research on us in the workplace. So you've got the Parker Review that looks at race, you've got McKinsey that looks quite diversely across diversity, but you don't really have very many stats about, you know, how many LGBT people are in senior roles, how many of them are out before they get there. Are there barriers sort of stopping us to getting in these kinds of roles? What's the voluntary commitment that LGBT plus people make, you know, as trustees or non-exec directors? How many boards are we on? Because those stats some exist, but they are quite sort of sparse, and I feel like this is a bit of a challenge for us as a community as well, that we're not really able to identify who's where, and therefore help to break down some of the barriers to entry that we might have.
Yeah, and that's before we even begin to talk about intersectionality and you know, what happens for people with, you know, multiple protected characteristics and how that can, you know, the kind of issues that they can face, the prejudice, the harassment, etc., can be is always more than the sum of its parts in those situations. So yeah, we don't have that kind of same degree of research into LGBTQ plus. And of course, therefore, we don't have that into, you know, other kind of intersections either, and that's a big and present issue. You know, we even have intersectionality within our own community. Of course, you know, you can be gay and trans, for example, and how does that affect your experience? We're not even sort of beginning to understand that in terms of people participation within an organisation, within leadership and management, especially.
Yeah. And I guess the only other thing that I can think of at the moment is Section 28 was, you know, omnipresent when I was at school, and certainly anybody over the age of 35 went through secondary education with Section 28 in place. That meant that you couldn't really talk about sexuality as a young person, and I think it sort of set the scene through the 80s and 90s really for lots of people about how they talk about or don't talk about their sexuality in that kind of context, so a school context or a studying context or beyond that into work. And so if you look at leadership roles, often they are occupied by people that are over 35. It's kind of natural. You build up your experience and then you get into higher profile roles. And with that kind of backdrop, it can be challenging to talk about, I think, sometimes. And so that's why we think partly the peer support is important, because that is a shared experience as well.
Yeah, I guess we get our template, don't we, for how we operate organizationally, our template for kind of leading and for following from our days in school. It is the first kind of organizational structure that we're part of, and rightly or wrongly, that really has an impact on how we navigate the workplace later and how we set up our workplaces as leaders and directors of organizations as well. So that is really interesting that for both of us, for our entire school life, it was legally prohibited for our teachers to actually discuss the existence of gay people, which would have, from a practical perspective, which would have no doubt had a real knock-on effect on us and on other people around us. It's really worrying to see that trend being repeated. We've got what's been termed the "Don't Say Gay" bills that we're seeing progress in some states in the US, and of course, Section 28 or something even worse than it never went away in some countries as well. So, in an international community where we're working with people, perhaps even within the same organization, but in an office in another country, there's a whole extra dimension for us to consider there as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And there is a particular challenge in this country at the moment for trans people, I would say. Right now, this is a challenging time. What we want to say to you is you are very welcome in our community. We are very much LGBT with the T. Please do join us. Please, tell other people. We're very welcoming. And Matt, would you like to just talk about some of the previous events that we've had, but maybe also the online event that's upcoming with Ian, and why that's been postponed as well?
Yeah, sure. So we've had a number of events. As I said, the network's got over 500 people in it now. We only managed to have a few in-person events before COVID hit, so we switched to online. That's been great. We've heard from all sorts of interesting people that have founded organizations, that are leading organizations, businesses and charities as well. And some people working in government, including an MP, Hannah Bedell MP specifically. So we were due to hear from Ian Anderson, and who was the UK's first ever LGBT plus business champion. But due to the government's position on conversion therapy and them excluding trans people from the ban on conversion therapy, Ian took the decision to step down from that role, which we absolutely understand and supported. So that event has been deferred as a result of that, but we are really still hoping to speak more with Ian in future once the dust settles on that decision.
Yeah, so if you go to our website, prideinleadership.co.uk, and then go across to the upcoming events page and click on that, you can actually register for our online events as well as for our face-to-face event in Manchester. Matt, we've got a few minutes left, so would it be useful to talk about some personal experiences that we might have had that might be relevant?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'm sure you and I have had, lots of sort of personal experiences, both minor and major, that have kind of fed into our decisions to start a network. Just thinking what might be, springing up for me. Most recently, I guess, just pre-COVID, actually, I work internationally, as I mentioned at the start, and that is probably one of the times where my identity kind of comes most to the fore in terms of having to navigate. Am I allowed to exist in the country that I am being required to visit for work purposes, or that I've been invited to visit that might help progress my career if I accept that invite? And that always shocks people, particularly allies, when I speak to them about that's something that happens this century, but it very much does. I was, for example, speaking at a conference in Russia pre-pandemic, and the reality of kind of safety for LGBTQ plus people on the ground, implications around visibility, and especially being positioned as a kind of speaker at an event, all of that poses challenges for LGBTQ plus people. And actually, I'm sure many people that might be listening, and certainly other people in our network, have had that moment of thinking, oh God, if I do go to this meeting in this place, what considerations do I have to make? How visible can I be? How do I need to moderate my speech, perhaps the way that I act or behave? What's on my social media? Because of course we all leave a big digital trail now. It's not simply possible to kind of pass, as the ugly expression goes, for a while if actually you're open and out and proud on your social media. So yeah, that was a recent experience for me that caused some worry, and that was before this network, and it would have been great to be able to connect with people who had maybe visited Russia and said, oh, this is not a problem, or make sure you think about this, or whatever. How about you, Claire? I know you've
I similarly, I was invited at one point to speak at something in Africa, and I looked into the sort of human rights of the country that I was invited to speak at, and I said no, and I told somebody, they're very unfriendly, let's say, towards gay people, and that person said, well, you don't have to tell anybody. And that's part of it as well, isn't it? It's like, so you've got to hide this big chunk of yourself that's everything in your life, actually.
And also that person not feeling that that's a problem. That's also a bit of an odd experience that can be quite damaging when you're around people and they just sort of don't get it. They don't get what the impact is on that, or at the very least, they don't perhaps empathize with how ridiculous it is in this day and age that's something that happens. So, and that can leave you feeling kind of isolated and not quite seen as well, and have its toll on you as well over time, I think.
Another experience that I had, I was actually on holiday in France a few years ago now, 2018 it was, and we were sitting I was sitting with my wife, we were having dinner, and next to us there was a load of surgeons, maybe 8 surgeons, mixed gender. And they were having a conversation. There was a conference on at the time in Toulouse, and they were having a conversation, and another surgeon from the conference walked past, and they all waved at him, and he said hello and everything. And when he left, they started calling him the worst names. He was obviously gay. They started using the most terrible language about him. We were sitting there, in France, they put about this much space between you and the next table, don't they? So it was like we were sitting with them. And that, my wife actually took them on, which I thought was incredibly brave, and not something that you do every day, to sort of say, do you mind? That's out of order. So I was very proud of her for doing that. But it did show me, when people don't know that you're gay, sometimes you will observe the real prejudice that's behind the facade. That fella who walked past wouldn't have known that actually he was about to suffer from homophobia. He wouldn't have known that it had happened afterwards either, and that's probably for the best. But he might be
that may well have affected his career progression, his relationship with colleagues in ways that he wasn't, even aware of. And, that has a huge impact, doesn't it? Just on your professional life as well as your personal life. Exactly. And you do hear things, unfortunately, every now and again until you're out. And I think I've spent most of my life being extremely out. I mean, not as much as I am now through being involved in this network, but quite deliberately I've done that, and it does protect me, I think, from those kinds of incidents. But at the same time, I recognize that not everybody's in such a privileged position where they're able to be out at work in the same way. So yeah, that's a couple of experiences from me, really. We haven't got any questions from anybody, but we did have somebody called Nathan who said hello, and he's going to join us at the event in Manchester. So I guess that's just what's left for us really to do is give another plug, please, to join us on prideinleadership.co.uk. Come to our event in Manchester, come to our online events as well, get involved. And yeah, please help us to spread the word about this, because we also know that, we don't have massive marketing budgets. It's just us volunteering. And if there's anything you can do to spread it out to communities that we can't reach through our LinkedIns, join us on LinkedIn as well. I'm the only Claire Ebrey on there. What about you, Matt? I think there's quite a few Matt Haworths actually, but I think I will probably pop up if you follow Claire first, then it will presume that you also want to follow me. So yeah, go and do that.
None quite as dashing as you, I'm sure.
Oh, not at all.
And yeah, thank you all so much for joining us today, and for those of you that are watching back afterwards, it's been really great to do this. Huge thanks to charity people who have supported us right from the very beginning of this silly little episode that we're involved with, because it's a proper organization. We were kind of just doing this voluntarily, and having them get behind us in the way that they did was really important, and it really encouraged us to keep going. So huge thanks to charity people for that. Bye now.
Thanks everyone. Hopefully see you at one of our events soon. Bye.